response to this idea on the show this morning. Boris Johnson's idea. He's expected to announce a move back to imperial measurements to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. That would mean that shops would see a return to using pounds and ounces, for example.
The EU introduced a directive back in the year 2000 that meant traders were legally required to use the metric system. But now the UK's left the EU, is it time to revive imperial units once more? Pip Thompson has this report.
Well, we're joined now by Conservative MP Mark Francois, who supports the imperial revival, and member of the Green Party, Baroness Jenny Jones, who thinks it's all a confusing, I use her words, cover-up. What's being covered up, Baroness?
Well, obviously, this is an opportunity for the Prime Minister to throw a dead cat on the table and make us talk about this very trivial issue instead of all the other stuff that's going on. You know, the Sue Gray report, the cost of living crisis, the climate crisis. And so what he's done is to distract us. It's a distractive measure.
All right. Well, let's just for the sake of argument assume that you're right. It's the famous dead cat on the table. That's what you do when you want to change the subject. But even if it is it in itself wrong? Is there anything wrong with doing it?
Well, it's a ludicrous suggestion because, in fact, well, first of all, he's only announced a consultation. Secondly, people can still sell in pounds and inches. It's still perfectly legal. We still buy pints of beer, for example. And so people can buy, if they want, a half a pound of apples. But the person selling them just has to make sure that they can sell in metric as well. The thing about the metric martyrs was they refused to let their scales be calibrated. And that was where they were breaking the law.
Right. Well, Mark Francois, what do you make of that then? The suggestion there that it's ludicrous, we can still use imperial measurements, and that it's a distraction. It's convenient timing at the moment, all of this.
Well, to be honest, I don't think it's about cats, whether dead or alive. It's about freedom of choice. So the government will publish a consultation, the essence of which will be, would people like to have the choice, if they're a market trader or Sainsbury's, to sell specifically in imperial measures? I don't think anyone's going to be compelled to do that if they don't want to. It's about freedom of choice. But there's an important point of principle here, which is that now we've left the EU, if we want to, if Parliament decides to, we can divulge from all of these different directives and regulations that we inherited from the European Union. So if we were to continue this trend, top of my list would be the General Data Protection Regulation 2016, the infamous GDPR. How many of your viewers, you know, when they ring a call centre and try to speak to a company and ask for something, get told, oh, sorry, under GDPR, I can't go into that. You know, this is part, I hope, of a wider trend of rolling back EU red tape where we choose to do so, because Parliament now has the legal right to do that, and I think we should see this move in that wider context.
But Mr. Francois, there's hardly a sort of a huge clamour and hue and cry for this, is there? And as Pip Thompson, our reporter, said, and she's absolutely right. I mean, for example, when I step on a set of scales, I read it out in stones and pounds and ounces. When I drive at 30 miles an hour, not what the kilometre equivalent is. I'm 6'2". I don't measure myself in centimetres or metres. This is a given. People are already using and have been using imperial measures ever since the non-imperial measures the metric ones were brought in. So it's a bit of a non-story, isn't it?
Well, as I say, I think there's an important point of principle here. You're quite right that, we've always had a mixed economy in these matters. We're used to buying our fuel in litres, but as you say, when you then drive out from the petrol station onto the road, your speed limits are in miles per hour. What this is saying is that traders will have the choice to sell goods in imperial measures if that's what they think their customers want. But I would just make the point, there's a wider point of principle here, that we are now, because we've left the EU, able, if we choose, to diverge from all the thousands of EU regulations and directives that we were effectively governed by when we were in the EU. And that the critical point about the metric martyrs case, as it was called, the judge famously said, this is the most famous pound of bananas in British legal history, was that what it did was it brought home to ordinary Britons the extent to which, at that time, EU law transcended British law. That, if you like, was the heart of the case.
All right.
And I think what we're saying is now British law means that we can diverge from the EU if that is something Parliament chooses to do.
All right, well, let's come back to Baroness Jones, Jenny Jones. You say that you think that the prime motivation for this scheme is to divert attention away from Partygate. But the truth of the matter is, whatever you may think about it, Boris Johnson has basically slipped through the net, hasn't he? I mean, Partygate is already bobbing in our wake. It's moving behind us. He's kind of got away with it, hasn't he?
I think probably he's got away with it in terms of the Conservative MPs, because clearly they are not doing the decent thing and actually getting him out of office. But I think the general public, they are not convinced by him anymore. I think he's lost a huge amount of support. He is probably the worst possible person to take them into the next general election, which is good perhaps for all the other parties. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, he has not escaped anything. Going back to what Mr. Francois was saying, he was talking a load of absolute nonsense, of course. We do still have choices about this. A lot of EU red tape was actually incredibly protective and allowed us to do all sorts of things that we couldn't before. And so this is not about going back to some wonderful heyday of the British Empire, because in fact even the imperial measures come from the Roman Empire. So, I think he is lacking a little bit historical perspective here.
Well, let's bring it bang up to date. Mr. Francois, what do you think about the reports in most of the papers yesterday that there is a plot afoot at Westminster amongst backbenchers and some people in the cabinet to get rid of Boris, that he is increasingly seen as an electoral liability? Yes, he may have got away on the technicalities on Partygate, but he could actually be punished, and therefore you lot could be punished at the next election. Be honest, have you heard rumours of a plot to remove him?
Well, if there's a plot, I'm not party to it. But having read the Gray report, I too was very disappointed by what I read. I think all Tory backbenchers from across the party were disappointed about what they read. And what I would like to hear when Parliament gets back next week is that there are going to be further management changes in number 10 Downing Street to make sure that something like this never happens again. I think we need to hear about more changes, potentially more personnel changes in number 10, so that we will not have a recurrence of these events, which I think all Tory MPs, have found quite disturbing.
Okie dokie. On that point, I'm afraid we have to leave it. However you time this, metric or otherwise, we're out of it. But thank you very much.